this story from the Globe certainly set off alarm bells here in Ottawa. The Prime Minister did nothing to quell the rumors that Chrystia Freeland is on her way out from the finance portfolio.
We've recently talked a lot about what is going to happen this summer regarding Chrystia Freeland and whether or not Mark Carney will indeed make an appearance in red for the Liberal Party before Trudeau is dragged out of the office kicking and screaming. It turns out Vassy Kapelos agrees.
Let's take a look.
Let's bring in CTV chief political correspondent Vassy Kapelos. Vassy, Ottawa has promised to meet the 2% spending target by 2032. Why now, and how is the government planning to pay for it?
Hi, Heather. Yeah, there aren't a lot of answers when it comes to how this new spending will be accounted for or where the government is going to get the money for it. We are talking about additional billions of dollars each year, but I think that is reflective of the first part of your question, which is why now? Just a few months ago, April 8th, I think, the Minister of Defense released a defense policy review. He articulated a goal of getting to 1.76% by 2030, but didn't have a goal of going to 2%. The pressure from allies in the interim has increased to a point where it came to a head in Washington this week. And my sources say this plan to get to 2% was only finalized in the last few days. Says a lot about the reasons for actually making this announcement now.
So, as you probably already know, Trudeau and Blair got blasted when they went down to Washington at the NATO summit, and they were blasted because, you know, they're like, so Canada, where's your 2% in spending? And they're like, well, we're gonna be at 1.7, and everyone tore that apart. And they said, you're not on track to be at 1.7. You're on track to be 1.4.
Well, and then was it Trudeau or was it Freeland the other day was going off about how Canada's the 7th highest spender in NATO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But again, that doesn't really mean anything if you're not comparing it to a percentage.
Well, and imagine this. Canada's the 7th highest spender in the G7. That means you're last.
But it wasn't in the G7.
No, it was in all the NATO
It was in all
allies.
of NATO, but the point being, some of these countries are really tiny and have a tiny GDP. So for them, 2% is, again, you go based on percentage because it's higher for what they can do. You know, like, for example, when I first started working in the workforce, I think minimum wage was like $6.85, and now it's like 15 something, 16 something. I'm not even sure, to be quite honest. But if I had spent $7 on something, well, that's over an hour's wage. But now if I spend $7 on something, it's only half an hour's wage. So that's why you go based on percentage. Yeah.
And, you know, we have, it would be like comparing our GDP with, you know, Monaco or Cuba. It's just, it's a different ballgame because they don't have the population, they don't have the industry, and they don't have the resources to have a high GDP. So that's where we are. And so it's obvious that Trudeau and the Liberals, while they were down there, saw that, we're getting crapped on by everybody, so we better come up with some sort of plan on how we're going to get to 2%, and maybe that'll shut them up. So according to Vassy, what they did is they hid in a back room, had some McDonald's. Actually, no, they probably had some, like, you know, $20,000 steak or so. Yeah. Airlifted in from Moscow, thanks Putin, to actually put this together. And now they're saying, oh, well, by 2032, we'll be at 2%. When originally it was going to be 2030, and they couldn't meet that. So great. Way to just completely lose the respect of all of our allies, even more than they probably already had.
Well, and where are they going to get this money?
Right?
Again, money doesn't grow on trees, because if it does, that means inflation for the rest of us. So they're going to have to tax us.
Well, I know where they're going to get, because the budget will balance itself.
Oh, of course.
And we also heard from the Prime Minister today on reports of tensions with the Finance Minister. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this story from the Globe certainly set off alarm bells here in Ottawa. The Prime Minister did nothing to quell the rumors that Chrystia Freeland is on her way out from the finance portfolio. It looks like people around him certainly believe she is a big part of the reason that they are doing so badly in public opinion polls. Whether Mark Carney gets into the game, well, that's a whole different story, though the Prime Minister didn't deny asking him.
I have been talking with Mark Carney for years now about getting him to join federal politics. I think he would be an outstanding addition at a time when Canadians need good people to step up in politics.
Now, sources close to Carney tell me that it would be a long shot for him to come into the portfolio at this time. He is still considering, of course, a bid to replace Trudeau at the helm of the Liberal Party. Associating himself with the Trudeau brand at this point could be politically damaging in the long run. What seems much more certain, however, as I mentioned off the top, is that Chrystia Freeland is likely on her way out this summer from the Minister of Finance.
One can only hope.
Gee, that sounds very familiar. Looks like we're actually kind of on the right track with this on both occasions. So if you'd watched our other videos on this, what we had postulated was that it doesn't make sense for Mark Carney to jump on the Titanic as it's going down. It makes sense to it to show up on the Lusitania, to actually fish the survivors out of the water and be the hero. Much in the same way Trudeau did when he joined the Liberal Party in 2013, and they were in obscurity at that point.
Yeah, they weren't even official opposition, were they? No, it was the NDP, if I remember correctly.
It was under Tom Mulcair.
Yeah, that's right.
So, the same thing would be like if Trudeau decided to join the Liberal Party, right when Paul Martin was going down with the ship, like that would be the same thing. It would be silly for Trudeau to do that. So obviously that's the way Mark Carney is looking at this. And Mark Carney is a businessman, conscious of brand and the power of brand recognition. And right now the Trudeau brand, which is the Liberal brand, they are interchangeable. It is very, very poisoned. And I love it that they're trying to say, hey, well, the reason why Canadians don't like the Liberals right now is because Chrystia Freeland did a very poor job of communicating the budget.
No, that's not it at all. I mean, Chrystia Freeland is just carrying out Trudeau's vision in terms of the budget. I mean, she's an awful finance minister. She doesn't seem to be a very good human being either, and I don't think anybody's going to miss her. But
and she's not a good driver.
No, we know that. But Trudeau really is throwing her under the bus to try to save his own skin, and that's just as bad.
Well, and here's the thing: if Freeland is as loyal as a friend as he says, the ridiculous part is she may just go along with it.
If it was me, I wouldn't. I'm like way too vindictive for that sort of thing. You're gonna throw me under the bus, so I'm taking you with me.
Well, and I wonder, because the fact that the Globe reported that there was tension between Freeland's office and the PMO's office kind of means that Freeland's office and Freeland herself isn't too happy with these quote-unquote leaks that have been making it out of the PMO.
Would you be if you were Freeland?
No, but I wouldn't be working for Trudeau either. So.
Yeah, that's true.
So word is, I think we can kind of take this, as fact now, that Carney is not coming before Trudeau actually goes down with this ship. So that's part one. And part two is, sounds like Freeland is actually going out, and history is going to repeat itself, as we talked about in our previous video, in that this is the exact same playbook that Trudeau was using when he got rid of Bill Morneau, which is his previous finance minister, almost to the T, and kept saying, "Oh, I have complete confidence." Okay, so that means she's done. If you have to say that, that means she's done. And the question for her is, like, are you going to stay on as deputy prime minister after the prime minister's office has disparaged you?
Not just that, but is she going to keep her seat? Because, I mean, she could be removed from her position as finance minister, and Trudeau could put her in another portfolio. Or he could just remove her from cabinet and keep her as deputy prime minister. He could remove her from both and she goes and sits on the back bench. Or she could just resign altogether.
Well, and this is what Bill Morneau did, right? Because when you go through that level of humiliation, and that's what it would be, right? Because all of these leaks are out. And then if he goes ahead and does that, it confirms the leaks.
Right. And it's a demotion. It's a huge demotion. She'll lose like 50%. No, she'll lose her 50% bonus for being a minister if he removes her from cabinet. So right now the MPs make, I don't even know what it is. It's just over 200. No, it's higher than that. It's
like
just over
210.
200,000. No, I think it's about 204, 206. But point being, it's just over $200,000. Plus they get 50% bonus for being in the cabinet. So she'd lose that 50% bonus. So she'd lose that extra 100,000 and change, right? So it's like a huge blow financially for her if she were to be removed from cabinet. And it's a demotion as well, because in your political career, you know, you get in as a backbencher and then you start working your way maybe towards committee chair, maybe towards speaker, maybe towards cabinet, but you don't typically go backwards.
Then you end up on Mendocino Island.
Yes, you do.
But here's the thing, you know, it all comes down to it. What would Freeland do? And the other calculation that Trudeau better be thinking of here is, okay, so if I completely shut down Freeland and then she decides to resign, am I going to have yet another former MP, former minister turn around and start speaking against Justin Trudeau? Because that's something else he needs to take into consideration when you already have other former people from his caucus turning around and saying Trudeau's doing a terrible job, he needs to step down.
Well, let's talk about that, because I always get the impression that Chrystia Freeland is incredibly loyal to Trudeau, like to a fault. Like she'll do whatever he says. If he says go jump off a cliff, she'll do it. But I also think she's got a mean girl streak. I think she's vindictive. I think she could turn around and backstab him.
Well, and think about it. She could be Trudeau's Brutus, right? And I'm talking about Caesar, of course, because at one time, Brutus was incredibly loyal to Julius Caesar, until his impression was that his loyalty was not being valued at all. So if Trudeau proves that he is disloyal to her, sometimes the most loyal people can be the most vindictive.
Right.
So time will tell. We only have a month and a half left until summer is over, and then another roughly a month until Parliament sits again. So there's not a lot of time, Trudeau, and you're not having a caucus meeting. So it's going to be a very, very, very probably long summer for Chrystia Freeland, for her to find out what happens next.